morning. Moving inside, thank you for that. It's kind of you. Is everyone set? Yeah, great. The Local Government Association of Queensland is meeting here in Cairns in the heart of far north Queensland this week. So representatives of local communities from right across the state have descended here to Cairns to talk about the issues facing their local community. And I've got to say, being in town, it's fantastic to see Cairns pumping again. Great to see a cruise ship in town. And of course, the LGAQ conference itself is an important economic contribution to the local community here. The Palaszczuk government is pleased to sponsor the LGAQ conference. We have a lot of ministers and assistant ministers attending the conference over the few days, and I have Minister Bailey here with me now. The theme of this year's conference is livability, and how central that is to our Queensland lifestyle and how we all want to maintain our fantastic Queensland lifestyle. Part of that is addressing housing, and later in the week we will hold a housing summit to discuss housing affordability and sustainability right across the state. And what we know is that in different parts of the state there are different housing affordability challenges. One thing that's been pointed to is the increase in recent years of short-term rental accommodation. So people taking their properties off the long-term rental market and renting them out on Airbnb or stays or that kind of thing. Now, it's hard at this stage to quantify exactly what impact that is having on housing affordability, and so the Queensland Government, the Palaszczuk Government, will commission an expert review to determine precisely what is the impact of Airbnb and stays and other short-term rental accommodation on the long-term rental market, on affordability and choice in the long-term rental market. And we look forward to those findings, and of course they may well lead to further regulatory change if that is deemed necessary. Locally here in Cairns, again to address housing supply and affordability, we're announcing today that the Palaszczuk Government will provide to Cairns Regional Council a $15 million loan from our Building Acceleration Fund. We know that often the impediment to getting new housing lots into the market is delivering the infrastructure required for those lots, things like water and sewerage and power. And so this $15 million loan will assist Cairns Regional Council to deliver an $18.2 million water infrastructure project, unlocking nearly 500 lots. It's the unlocking nearly 500 lots. This is near Mount Piper over the next 5 to 6 years. It'll create 42 jobs in the process. We're really pleased to partner with the council to do that. It's great to have Mayor Bob Manning here to talk to that as well. So I'll ask Minister Bailey to say a few words.
Look, great to be here with the Deputy Premier, Mark Jameson, President LGAQ. Great to have Mayor Bob Manning here as well. Look, as a former three-term councillor, I know personally how important local government is. Working with local government on our transport and roads task is a really important part of our job as a state government and very important to regional economies. We're spending 50% more now on infrastructure in Queensland than when we first come to office, where we saw some very deep and savage cuts, particularly to local government funding under the previous Newman government. I've been really heartened to work with local government right across the state, and we're seeing a lot of infrastructure go into place. Of course, we restored a range of funding mechanisms when we came to office. So the TIDS program we restored back to its rightful place in terms of funding levels. Cycling, for instance, we contribute 50-50 with local government in partnerships there to get as much done as we can. And there's a range of other areas where funding with local government is really important between state and councils. So great to join the Deputy Premier here. This annual conference is really important to bring together our councils, very diverse councils in Queensland, from very small, spread out councils to very major, the largest council in Australia. The diversity is important, but you've got to have that conversation. So always glad to join.
Good morning, Mark Jameson, Mayor of the Sunshine Coast and President of the LGAQ. Thank you for being here. It's really important for local government to demonstrate to our communities the importance of the role we play As the ministers have said, there's 77 councils across Queensland represented here in Cairns, and we thank Bob and the Cairns Council for the tremendous welcome. It is wonderful to see so much activity in Cairns, given the challenges of the pandemic. That has impacted all councils across the state and all communities. Very often, in many of our communities, councils are in fact the largest employer and the most significant economic driver in those communities. Our relationship with the state government is absolutely vital in us being able to deliver that livability. Councils are to the front and centre when local disasters hit, and we've had our fair share of those, both from a weather perspective and from the pandemic. Look, there's a variety of challenges that local government has to deal with. This conference will be remembered for it being the conference immediately after the report on the Office of Independent Assessor has been released with 40 recommendations, many of which, well, all of which are of great concern to local government. Most importantly, the notion that councillors, should have the implied right of freedom of speech that everybody else has. Being a councillor shouldn't limit your ability to, in fact, represent the community you serve. I think that's particularly important. It's great for all of our councils to get together, share ideas, be able to see through the trade display exactly what sort of new services or equipment is available for them to invest in for their community. Thank you.
Right for volume? Good. My wife always tells me I talk too softly. Look, it's pleasing today to receive this announcement about this funding. Council has a lot of work ahead of it. People seem to think we're out of the doldrums and we're now moving ahead. That's not the case at all. It is a case that we're moving along well, but we've got a whole international market yet to come back. So for us, there's still a whole lot of work ahead, and whether that's in housing or other issues, the road for us is still a hard one. I think it's a hard for everybody. I don't think that anybody can sort of think at the moment, we're in clear water, because I don't think that's the case. I think there's still another kick or two in this to come, and we just hope it's not for us. But we welcome this funding. We welcome this arrangement with the state government to enable this subdivision to push ahead a little bit earlier. And we're certainly looking for land. Everybody's looking for land. We have problems with long-term accommodation versus short-term accommodation, and that shouldn't be getting used as a football to be kicked around on a paddock. Thank you.
All right. Any questions?
A few questions,
Sure.
if you don't mind. Does the state government know how many short-term rental properties there are in Queensland and the percentage of the market that amounts to?
We don't at this stage. That's the entire purpose of this study, is to determine how much of our housing stock is being occupied by short-term rental accommodation, so that we can then evaluate what impact that's having on the market. The providers don't share that information with us, so much of what we know at the moment is anecdotal. Some people say it's having a massive impact. Some people say it has very little impact. So let's get to the bottom of that before we can consider what appropriate responses might be.
Why should homeowners be prevented from using their property how they choose?
We're not suggesting that they should be prevented. We are simply wanting to understand what contribution short-term rental accommodation and its increase over recent years is having to the current housing affordability crisis.
Do you think this really will help the housing prices?
I think it'll help us to understand what's going on. It will certainly help us to respond to those who say that it is a significant driver to affordability, and allow us to quantify that.
This review was announced back in July. Do you know where you're at with it now?
So at this stage, we're seeking tenders for the review. That process closes on the 27th of October. We hope to have the outcomes by the end of the year.
Just on another matter, Murray Watt said yesterday that the floods across Australia will have an impact on the cost of living because of the impact on prices of fruit and vegetables. Are we worried that this might affect Queensland?
Well, we saw through the Queensland floods, the southeast Queensland floods, just what an impact those kinds of disasters can have, a long-term impact on the price of fresh produce. Clearly, these floods in Victoria are devastating. The focus right now is on supporting people through that crisis stage, but it will no doubt have an impact on the cost of those goods in our supermarkets.
Just on the housing summit, are you aware if there's been any take-up since the granny flat planning changes? Take-up since the granny flat planning changes?
I'm not aware of how many people have taken up that opportunity. We certainly had a lot of people say to us prior to making that change that they had accommodation that they would like to make available, and so hopefully now they're going about finding people to stay in them.
Has the government done an audit of its own property to check if there's any vacant or unused property that could quickly be converted?
So we are currently undergoing a process to scan state and local government-owned land. So we've provided to all local governments a questionnaire to ask them to assist us in advising what properties might be available where we could put, for example, modular emergency accommodation. So yes, that process is underway.
Just on the public trustee, the state government has announced a freeze on increases to fees and charges from the public trustee for a year. What will happen after that?
I'm sorry, I'm not across that issue, but I'm happy to get your response.
Yep. And can I just get you on Ivanhoe Dam?
Sure.
So currently 87.1% of heavy rain predicted to fall in the southeast over the next couple of weeks. Will you close the gates again?
In preparation for what we are advised by the Bureau of Meteorology will be a very wet season, another very wet season, we are lowering what the temporary full level of the dam is to 80%. That means we'll continue to release water in an effort to maintain it at that 80% level, increasing our flood capacity. So we will continue to have the entire flood compartment as well as that extra capacity in the dam that will be delivered by reducing that level. We're releasing the water now. There's water releases ongoing now. The engineers are doing that in accordance with the dam manual. We're also saying to South East Queensland residents who are supplied from the Ivanhoe Dam that if they'd like to use the water right now they should. There's plenty of water there. We're releasing it down the river, and so now's a great time if you need to wash your house or gurney your driveway. Please consider doing it now while there's plenty of water available.
Should drivers over 75 be subject to stricter checks on their licences?
Yeah, look, they're already drivers over 75 are required to have a medical certificate from a practising medical practitioner. So there are measures in place. Obviously, I was concerned to hear about the crash yesterday and the injuries to people involving a 95-year-old driver. That matter is under investigation by police, and I'll certainly be interested in the outcome of that. As the Minister for Transport and Main Roads, I want to make sure that road safety is as strong as it can possibly be on our roads.
Should people in their 90s be banned?
Look, I think people in their 90s should certainly be looking very closely at whether all their faculties are at a sufficient level to make sure that they're safe drivers. And obviously, as you age, there's some of those faculties start to decline. I know my own mother gave up driving when she was about 85, 86, because she just wasn't certain about her ability to drive safely as well to the standard she would want. I think it affects different people in a different way. I don't know the gentleman involved in this crash, of course, but the investigation will give us some information, and I'll be looking at that closely.
Very good.
Thank you.
Can we just have a few shots, if you don't mind, if you all just have a quick chat before you go?